here's the method, here's the evidence, okay? And then you talk about the discussion, and at the end of the day, here's the conclusion. So it builds up, right? That knowledge builds up until the conclusion. So this is the thing that I was referring to earlier, and that is the non-technical, technical versus technical writing. So what I mean non-technical is any writing, like, you know, when you write a novel, okay, like riwaya, okay? The way you write it is different, fundamentally different from the way you write a technical paper. So I'm only citing here some of the differences, but there are others as well, okay? So the first one is clarity versus suspense. If, for instance, I were to write, say, you know, a novel, a roman policier, okay? What would be the asset? A roman policier, c'est un suspense. So the fact that you don't know, that you read and you're trying to figure out what's happening. Somebody was killed, and then they start telling you, oh, here's the life that they had, and they say, oh, he's a lawyer, and they had friends, and then, you know, there was a drug deal that went this, and then you start saying, but who could have killed him? And you only find out maybe in the last page, right? You do that with a paper, you're done. You're going to be rejected. You never do that with a paper. You tell the story, the end story at the beginning, and that is your contribution. Remember, I don't read the technical paper for fun. I read the novel because I wanted to have fun. This is actually the thing that I wanted to have. But if I read a paper, I would like to know as soon as possible what the paper is all about. I don't know wait until page 6 or page 8 to find out that the paper is about something. So it has to be done, there's no suspense. It has to be clear. That actually, you know, the paper proposing a new method to do this and that, and here's what, you know, building up. So it has to be done. You don't say, oh, I'll tell you later. It doesn't exist. If you do that, your paper, I can guarantee you, will be rejected. Okay? So, and then there is the concept of top-down and bottom-up. What do I mean by that? Top-down means you start with the more general thing, and then you go to the more specific, right? This is how you would write a technical paper. Why? Because you want to put a context to whatever you're doing. Say, here's what people have done, here is what others know, and I'm focusing on only this part here, and here's what I'm proposing. So, it's like a cone, right? A novel usually starts with something very specific, like, you know, just giving the example I was using before. If it's a crime scene, you start by defining the crime scene, which is very specific. And then later on you talk about the context. You say, oh, by the way, this is what happened. So it's completely different ways. You don't start by saying, you know, oh, we have, you know, that there was a family that actually was involved in drugs, and then yeah, say it's about the crime. No, usually, actually, they want you to be curious. That's why they start with the crime, so they ask questions. So it's by design. They want to ask you questions. But that's not how a paper is. You don't want to ask questions, you want answers. So you give me the answers. I don't want you to guess. Because if I guess, I can guess wrong. And if I guess wrong, that means I reject the paper. So be careful. You have to. So it has to be top down, not bottom up. You don't start with specific things. You start with the general things, and then go back to, down to the more specific items. And then the language itself that you use, right? The formal and informal language. In a novel, of course, it's an informal because it's trying to depict the real life. So the language that you use is the language of the street, because this is what it is. Do you use this street language in a paper? No. It has to be formal because you're talking to people who are like you, who use actually more sophisticated language, right? That actually has to be a formal language. That's very important. And then you talk about organization. In terms of the paper, it has a rigid organization. And I told you the description of a good paper. The description of a good paper is, you have title, abstract. Don't put the title at the end. Have you ever seen a paper at the end? Title? No. So it's rigid in terms, it's what the expectation. Whereas a novel, you can have whatever you want. You can start from the beginning to the end, and at the beginning, it doesn't matter. It depends on the story. So there is no really prescribed organization when you talk about knowledge. And now, in terms of knowledge that you produce, one is descriptive and the other one is innovative. The descriptive is your novel. Your novel is descriptive. It just tells you, it describes, like the crime scene, it's just descriptive. It describes it. It doesn't really create a new knowledge. Whereas in a paper, it's actually describing a new knowledge. That's why you need to compare it to previous knowledge. And you say, here's the gap, and here's how we're trying to address that gap. And I've told you this before, a novel is about entertainment, right? Whereas a paper is about creating new knowledge. So let's start with the first part of the paper, and that is the title. So the title is the first hook to get a reader interested. So you need to really think about the title of your paper. Okay? So put some effort. Some people, I don't know. I'm sorry, I have reviewed literally thousands of papers. And some people just don't understand that actually, if you give me a title where you haven't spent any time thinking about it, more likely than not, I would actually reject your paper. Do you know why? Because I would say that that's the way you approach the whole paper. It tells me who you are. You just don't pay attention to details. You're writing a paper, you're talking about science and technology. How could you not spend time thinking about what is it that you want to say? Remember, a title is your first hook. It's actually the part that makes you either interested or not interested. Spend some time thinking about it. Some people actually write sentences that's absolutely wrong. A title is a phrase. It means it doesn't have a verb. It's not a sentence. It's descriptive. It actually really tells you what the paper focus is all about, right? So you should be able to tell in few words what the whole paper is all about. Without verbs, absolutely not. No verbs whatsoever. You should never, ever use verbs in a title because it's descriptive. You're trying to describe what your paper is all about.
Can you put it in the form of a question? Can you put a title in the form of a question?
No, absolutely not. We'll talk about that actually. Yes, you're absolutely, that's a good question. No, because we're trying to find answers, not questions. You're directing at me. So do you want me to answer that question? No. So that's why you should have a question. In most cases, actually, it's a very bad style to have a title in the form of a question. It has to be in a positive way, saying it's a description of what the paper is all about. It has to be accurate, where people don't understand. So if you tell me that your paper, and here's an example, going back to the example of HIV/AIDS, that somehow your paper is about curing all HIV/AIDS, and then I found out it's only 50%. What do you think is going to happen? Rejected. You're lying. Why are you doing that? If you told me 50%, I would have accepted it. But I said this person has a tendency to overstate what they want. Therefore, probably somebody claims is actually wrong. So I become suspicious. Be accurate. It doesn't remove anything. 50% is good, because you're still curing 50%. Don't overdo it. Just say 50%. That's all. It's good enough. Don't say all. Some people in the title, they promise more than actually what's in the paper. Just Be reflective of what is the paper. Be accurate. Very important. Think about that. Okay? Then it has to be succinct. We need to be precise. It can't be too general. That I'm solving all the problems of the world. No. There's only a specific problem. Just say, what is the specific issue that actually you're addressing in the paper? And then it has to be catchy, meaning actually that it's used in a language that people say, oh, I would like to find out more. Right? The language is sophisticated in a way that says, oh, that must be a good paper. Right? And it's all about choosing the right words. Right? So you experiment with the use of words. And the way you actually find out is give it to a colleague of yours. I said, what do you think about the title? Oh, it raised my curiosity. And that's good, because the moment that means I would like to read more. If it's boring, what is it about? Is it the same thing that I've seen before? It looks like it's the same thing. You have a problem. Because now I'm thinking it's the same thing. So that's why you need to make sure that actually it's catchy. And also, somehow, highlighting what's going to happen at the end. That actually, at the end of the story, what we have now. So that's why I said it's 50% and 100%, but actually, so not always the case, but actually hinting of what may happen, that what you should expect. So as you can see, it's a title, right? People now, next. No, it's extremely important. You have to think about, because that's the first thing, that's the first impression. And guess what? The first impression usually is the last one. Right? The first impression could be the last one. So make a good impression on the reviewer. The second one. So I'm going to go fast. Am I going slow or fast? Huh? تحبون faster or تحبون good? No, feel free to tell me. It's not an issue for me, right? So the abstract. This is underrated, meaning that people don't pay attention to it. So although it's the second most important part of the title. Okay? And remember, reviewers like me and you, they don't have anything against you. I have never seen you. I didn't even know you existed. That actually you exist in this universe. So therefore I cannot do anything. You cannot, oh, you don't like it. Well, it's not you, it's your paper. I have no issue with you. So people say, well, but why? No. The person didn't even know you existed before they read your paper. So it's all about the paper. Make sure that whatever you do there, you want to increase the positive impression upon the reviewer. Okay? So, what is the format of the abstract? So, really what you want to do is to overview the main contribution, results, and evaluation of your paper. So do this. It's contribution, results, and evaluation. I'm sure many of you have probably have done it. In the abstract, they tell you your life story. Who's there? Here usually an abstract only one paragraph. Depending. No. It's only one paragraph. One. And two, it should be very short. Usually 7 lines, maybe 8 lines. The fewer the better. Because you should be able to say what your contribution in few words. If you know what it is, you should be able to do it. Right? So if you find yourself writing a long paragraph, then you should question whether actually you're doing more than you should. So for instance, I've seen it, and to this day, many times, students, and especially students, people who are not experienced, they start by saying the motivation, why they're doing the work, and then what they're doing, and then how to do it. This, an abstract is not a summary. Listen to me. An abstract is not a summary. It's only the contribution. People when they write abstract, they put everything in there. That's wrong. It's only what the contribution is. What is the new knowledge that you have produced. However small, what is the new knowledge? Okay?
What about the methodology? Usually we are required to mention methodology in the abstract.
If it's part of the contribution, yes. But if you say, you don't want to say the motivation, why you've done it. You see it in many papers, but it's the wrong way of writing an abstract. The abstract is about the what, not the how, not the why. What is your contribution? Not how you've done it, or why you've done it. It's only the what. If you find that your paper, an abstract, contains the why and how, that's wrong. Because as I said, it's easy actually to remember that. You say, a person read my paper, what do I want them to remember from it? It's your contribution. That's it. That's the abstract. That's something that you will remember to say, oh, that person proposed this, that solved this issue, and you can do it. That's it. Not the how and the why. The how and the why, you can read it. But the what is just the thing that, I think it's zibda. Yeah, the juice. That's the juice. That's the knowledge, yes. That's exactly. That's the new knowledge. Yeah, nothing else. It's because most people, when they start an abstract, they write it as a summary, and it's not a summary.
It's probably a little bit kind of different from the human social sciences and the sciences.
Maybe.
Some of the questions that are being raised here, they're the people who belong to more to the human and social sciences, and we have it different from the side.
Actually, I can speak from knowledge, even from the social, because my son is a psychologist, and he's a professor. So I know a little bit how they write it. And even there, actually, it has to do with the what, not the how and why. The good, high-impact psychology journals actually really require you to think that way. Is to only talk about this, the what. And then, you know, I don't know about other sciences, I know about psychology, right? Because my son is a psychologist. So it still applies, right? And you never miss by doing that. Because you spend your time thinking about the most important part of your paper. And that is what you have created. The why and how, the why is available everywhere. The how is just as a proof that how you came to implement it. But the what is the most important part. So remember that. And this is the part actually people really don't do well, right? So, please do not have this paragraph in this paper. We know it's not another paper. What do you say in this paper? How many papers have you read where it starts in this paper? Of course I know in this paper. Why are you saying it then? Right? So, it's just bad style. Bad style too, because you have nothing, you have to introduce it. Just say, we propose. Just go to the point. Remember, I don't want to wait. So don't say in this paper, because I know it's in this paper, not another paper. Also, at least not in mathematics, probably in mathematics, but it's more of the computer science and electrical engineering. You just don't use formulas unless it's the research you're doing. It's basically developing formulas. Don't use formulas in the abstract. Don't use references. References are definitely not acceptable because you want your abstract to be self-contained. I only read the abstract to know the contribution. I don't need to read a reference to understand that. So no references in your abstract. No formulas, no even shorthands like acronyms, unless those acronyms are very well known, like Wi-Fi. It's very well known. But try not to use acronyms unless, again, it depends on the area, it's part of the community understanding because it's very well known. Right? Otherwise, don't use them. Okay? It makes it very easy to understand. Remember, why are you doing this? You want to make it easy on the reviewer to understand what your contribution is and then to say, wow, I like this. As opposed, I don't understand. What do you mean? And that actually then, it builds up. And at one point, say, that's it, I don't like it. You don't want that. So what you want is to make it very easy on the reviewer to actually read it and enjoy it. You say, oh, I like this. I want to know more. Right? As opposed to, I don't understand. Why are you saying this? I have to go back. You waste their time. So that's the reason why you want to use these techniques to make sure that the reviewer actually enjoys reading your paper. Okay? So, now the introduction.
A small question, sir, before you move on. About the keywords that comes right after the abstract. Do we draw them from the title, or from the abstract, or from the body of the article?
So for the keywords, it depends, right? There are some standard apps, some of the publications, like the IEEE, for instance. They have their own keywords that you choose from, and others, also the ACM, they have them. But some others actually they ask you for the conferences one. You can just use keywords that you think are very important in your area, and you put them there. Usually, the keywords, they're not very important in the sense that they're not used to assess whether it's the right area or not. They only use them so that they can assign reviewers. So I know that somebody is an expert in X, and you put X, then I would take that paper and send it to X. That's all. It's not, but it's. So you don't want to go. You have to go to the wrong paper, right? Because otherwise they may not understand it. All right. Yes.
Sorry, what is the difference between...
Can you raise your voice, please?
What is the difference between abstracts and summary?
We'll talk about that later. So we'll talk about that later. Because we're going to spend some time doing that. So the introduction basically should have a description of the area and topic, a brief summary, of course, of the background, and sometimes the background is a different, depending on the style. Sometimes the background is a separate section, but it could be sometimes actually part of the introduction. So what you want is to have what we call a one-sentence overview of key papers. And then, of course, you make the assumptions, what are the assumptions of your paper. And then you want to have a summary, a synopsis of the results, methods that you're going to be covering in your paper, and then the impact, and what are the consequences of that. Okay? And really, at this point in the introduction, you should not really be focusing on evidence, detail, and using a lot of jargon that actually is difficult for people to understand, okay? And some of the mathematics that come with it. So remember, it's about building up the idea that actually, I want to introduce the topic, and I would like to tell you that how significant it is, and what the gap is, and here is what you should expect in the paper, right? So you don't want to give too much, but also you don't want to give too little. So it's a balancing act. So you want to give enough for the reader to say, oh, that's good. I like the problem. So you're going to tell me how you do it? Great. And then you say, oh, by the way, here's what we're going to be talking about. And then the person, okay, I'm going to find out more about that. Okay, so that's how, so it's really the psychology of how you go about writing the introduction. So, as I said, the background material sometimes is a separate section. The material would usually introduce the reader to the state of the art. So that is what has been done, okay, in the past, and then also the failings and shortcomings of the state of the art. Let me spend just a minute or two on this. And I've seen it many, many times. When people talk about other people's work, you usually talk in a very negative way. Why? Because they want to say, oh, what I've done is much better than them. So it's by putting people down, you think you get elevated. It's the opposite. Be careful when you talk about other people's work, not to use negative language, right? Very bad actually to say, oh, but you haven't done anything. Their method, it doesn't work. That's very strong, it's very negative. For two reasons, you don't want to say that. The first reason is that if you were to say that, it's unfair, because it could be the context and the assumptions they make is completely different from yours. Okay? The second thing is more personal. How about if that person is your own reviewer? What do you think is going to happen? Because the reviewer is anonymous, you don't know that. So be careful, because it could be that 1 in a million, where that reviewer is actually the person that you're saying you're bad, whatever you've done is bad. Be careful. And from a fairness point of view, you have to be also, put everything in context. You're always riding, like there's an expression, like riding on the shoulders of giants. People who came before you have done a lot of work. Don't think they're stupid. They're not idiots. They're very good, but they had a different context. If you compare, for instance, if you are about designing the new cars, and you compare your car to the cars that have been designed in the 1900s, 1908, you say, my car goes at 400 kilometers an hour. The ones that actually were developed in 1900, they went at 20 kilometers an hour. I mean, I'm much better than them. But you know what? Those people are much smarter than you. Because you had no knowledge when actually designed that first car. So to say that actually you're much smarter than them is actually not true. It's not true. Instead of saying, you know what? There was an evolution. And we relied on the ideas that actually these people developed. And we extend them. And because we have this, now we're able to do this. You can still say, I'm doing something new, without saying that those are bad. And this I see that all the time. People are negative about others. You can still say, I'm doing something new, without saying that others are bad. So be careful. When you identify the shortcomings of others, you do it in a positive way.
Sir,
Yes?
what's the difference between the contribution of the others on the abstract and the safety of the introduction? So you said that we literally mentioned others' contribution on... Okay.
Why don't you take this one now?
All right. Okay, so practically
Why don't
we're
you take this one?
mentioning others' contributions.
I want everybody to hear.
Okay. In fact, as I've just said, we're mentioning other contributions on the abstract and the introduction. And as far as I understood, is that we're literally saying it twice. So the thing that I didn't really get is why are we saying it twice? So I've already mentioned people's contributions on the abstract. Why am I going to say it?
No, absolutely not. I never said that. No, I think you misunderstood. Completely misunderstood. No, only your own.
Okay, actually, on the abstract, as I just understood, is that I'm taking the global part, so practically I'm taking what people have done on a main field. For instance, if I took like the IoT or any domain, I mean AI or whatever, and so technically I'm just grabbing the whole idea and I'm digging in depth. And
it's okay, I understood what you're saying. I think just probably you misunderstood what I said. What I'm saying is that actually the abstract only talks about your own contribution, full stop. You don't say why, how, just say what the contribution. Your own, not somebody else. In the introduction, for you to say basically what is new about my contribution is you have to compare it to others' contribution. Understand now? So by doing that, you don't want to say what they made was bad. You just say the context, what they've done, and the assumption they made, and now I actually to expand on that. So we build on it and expand, and here's what we added.
Sure.
So in a positive way. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, in fact, what about the length of the paragraph that we're writing? So actually, if I took people's contributions, I might write it in 10 pages. It's better if the domain is broad, What do you think about it?
No. Here's the background. It's about actually the related one, right? Background is the related one.
Okay.
So you just say what are the relevant, which is
So I
relevant.
can rely just on one paper. Actually, I just take a paper and rely on the whole thing on it. There's no problem.
Let's take that offline. We can talk offline.
Okay,
Let's
sure.
talk offline.
Thank you, sir.
It's not. So the third thing actually we'd like to talk about is why the problem is interesting. Remember, I told you at the beginning that it's not enough that actually you say, I am solving a problem. You want to also say, why it's an interesting problem. So you may come up with a very sophisticated